As I was preparing, trying to get something ready to share with you that might be useful, helpful, encouraging, something, I thought about Lily, about the different graduates going on, taking place right now. There was two graduations yesterday, and I think there's Mazama is this week or something like that. Anyway, it just made me think about the question, where do you go from here? And it's not just high school graduates, it's not just college graduates, but we get into certain points in life and we go, okay, so now that I'm here, what do I do? Where do I go next? How do I get anywhere? You might feel stuck in a place, you might feel happy where you're at, I don't know, but it just made me think of the question, where do we go from here? How do I get where I need to go? So I titled this one, Where You Lead. Where God leads. Weird story, but it'll make sense in a minute, I promise. But it's 2025 now, so 7 years ago? 7 years ago, my wife had this grand idea that we were going to take our family to Disneyland. And so we got to go down to that awful place known as L.A., Anaheim. Sorry. If you're from there, I'm sorry. I've been there. I don't. Anyway, we went down to Disneyland, and we got to spend 3 or 4 days down there. We had one of those things where she found one of those packages where you could go to Disneyland, and you could go to California Adventure, and then you could take a day and go to Universal Studios. We got to do all those kinds of things, right? And it was a lot of fun. It was great excitement. It was wonderful. There was all kinds of great things to do. If you've never been to Disneyland, you're probably better off. But after being at Disneyland, after going to those theme parks, I began to realize and piece together something about those things, about places like Disneyland and Disney World, Universal Studios, whatever, those theme parks. I began to realize that there's something about them that separates them from other amusement parks or amusement rides. And it's not just the cost. It's not just the money, because yes, we spent days, 3 or 4 days on rides and doing all kinds of fun things and spending a lot of money, because that's what they're there for. But I began to realize that there was a major difference between those things and, say, the fair. And it was a very subtle difference, maybe, I don't know, but it was an important difference that I began to realize over the course of those 4 days. And, okay, so I have a bias against things like roller coasters. I loathe them, and I think you all know that. But I also dislike things like carnival rides, because even though I like to go to the fair and I like to see the pretty lights and enjoy just the fair atmosphere, see the animals, eat the funnel cake, elephant ears, yes. Okay, but my point is that those rides at the fair, all they do is spin you around until you're sick, and they fling you against the sides of the rides until you are battered and bruised and broken, and when you get off, somehow they've convinced you that, they've convinced kids that they should do it again. My son thought it was a very fun idea to get me to go on the zipper with him. I knew I hated that ride to begin with. Then I realized that it was from the depths of hell that ride came from, because my son thought it was funny to listen to me scream as we flipped upside down. Don't worry. Carnival rides, fair rides, all those kinds of things, I don't understand why people like them, because honestly, all they do is they spin you around either this way or this way, and they just try to make you sick, and they just try to beat your body into submission, and for some reason, some kids think that's fun. That's not fun. But getting back to those theme parks, there is something that, all of those things, Disneyland, Universal, whatever it is, they have figured out that even though you're doing all those things, you're spinning, you're getting beat up, you're spending lots of money, all those things, you don't notice it at the time. There is something about the rides at Disneyland in particular, I'm going to use that as my example today, that as you are doing these things, they have helped you, they have persuaded you, they have brainwashed you, I don't care how you want to term it. When you are on these rides, there is always, and I mean always, either a character or a voice coming from somewhere that is telling you where to go and what to do. And so that even though the lines are long and annoying, you still are always going where you're supposed to be going and doing what you're supposed to be doing. And then as you go on the ride, that same person or another person, character, whatever it is, tells you a story as you're going through the ride. And even though you're being beat up and battered and made sick and all those things, because this person, this character, whatever it is telling you a story, you're okay with it. Best example I can come up with. Now it's Guardians of the Galaxy, but it was formerly known as Tower of Terror, which was very aptly named. You wait an hour to get on a broken elevator, and because a talking raccoon tells you a story while you are on it, you're okay with falling 3 stories. Because there's a character guiding you through this and telling you what's going on, somehow jumping up and down for, however many minutes on a broken elevator becomes fun. Better yet, one of the best rides, one of the greatest rides at Disneyland is one of the most boring rides at Disneyland, the Jungle Cruise. But why is it so fun, even though it's one of the most ridiculous rides in the park? Because the person at the front of the boat makes it fun. The person guiding you through and telling you all of the rehearsed jokes, all of the stupid stories, all of the ridiculous things about the backside of water become entertaining and fun, even though you're on a boat that's not actually a boat, it's just a thing on a track going through a prescribed course, seeing really bad animatronics, but it becomes fun. That's the difference between things like Disneyland and why we're willing to pay, why there are people who are willing to pay hundreds of dollars to go on these rides, and I refuse to ever go on a carnival ride again. There is this thing about those theme parks where they have somebody telling you a story, whether it's a pleasant ride or a drop for 4 stories, there's somebody telling you the story, and as you listen to the story, the things going on around you are not quite as bad or not quite as boring or not quite as crazy as they would be if they weren't there. Life can be crazy. It can feel maybe like you're stuck on a broken elevator, or sometimes it might feel like you're in the most boring part of life. Some days, you might beg for those boring days in life. But what I want to talk about this morning is where he leads, we follow as he tells us his story, which is our story. John chapter 10. John chapter 10, starting in the first verse, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. He's trying to get them to understand who he is, what he is doing. They don't want to listen. And so Jesus tells them this parable about the Good Shepherd, which is an idea that had been with them for a long time. Jesus isn't just coming up with the Good Shepherd idea. It's something that God had talked about in the Old Testament. And Jesus is trying to get these Pharisees to understand who he is as the Good Shepherd. And so Jesus tells them in verse 1, "Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all of his sheep, all of his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger, and in fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Then Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Now, hopefully this is familiar to you. This is a passage that you know, at least that last verse, right? I try to tell it to people as often as possible that God comes to bring life and life to the fullest. Jesus' purpose on earth was to bring life and life to the fullest, and I want you to know that and understand that. But part of how he gets us there is the sheep know his voice. Jesus came telling us God's story, telling us our story as we take part in what God is doing. And there's a few important things that I want us to pay attention to look at and remember. Wherever you are in life, you might think that you are halfway through it, towards the end of it, just starting it out. You might be in good times or bad times. Whatever it is, I want you to know at least these few things about God, about Jesus, and where he is calling you. And the first important thing is that Jesus tells us that his sheep will know his voice. They will recognize his voice. There are a lot of times in life where I'm sitting there going, I wish I heard any voice. Okay, I don't want to hear voices in my head, but I'm just saying I wish I could hear God's voice. And then the thing I have come to realize is that God has been speaking to us from the beginning, but a lot of times we have the TV turned up so loud that we can't hear him over it. Or maybe it's the radio, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the diesel engine in our truck, or something. We have turned things up so loud that we can't hear his voice anymore. And part of the reason, at least in my own life, again, I'll try not to point too many fingers, even though, try not to point too many fingers. I'll just let you learn from my own life. That sometimes I have those things up really loud because I don't like the silence and maybe I don't want to hear his voice. And so I turn things up so I don't have to hear his voice. I don't always like what he has to say, or I don't want to do what he tells me to do. And so I let the world turn up the volume on everything. And so that way he's drowned out and I don't have to listen anymore. I can be like, what? I can't hear you. Sorry. We have to learn to turn the volume down on the world so that we can let him break through. We can listen to him, hear him clearly. We have to recognize his voice. We have to actually spend enough time with him, reading his word and prayer and church and fellowship with each other. In all those different ways, we have to find a way to spend communion time with God and with our brothers and sisters, because if we don't, how will we learn to know his voice and recognize it over any other voice? That means we have to actually be around him enough to know his voice, so that when we do hear it, we are ready to listen. And here's another thing that is difficult for us. When Jesus calls, you actually have to get out of the sheep pen. Now, I know that might sound silly, but here's the thing. We can get really comfortable. We can get really complacent in our sheep pen because the fence is there and it keeps us safe. And it seems like there's plenty of food and water and all that kind of stuff. But I have a new experience with farm animals. Liv got chickens. I like chickens when they're dead and deep fried. Sorry if that offends you, but that's the best chicken there is. We're learning to raise chickens, and one of the things that I have begun to understand, is that if you let the chickens just stay in the coop, they get restless for one. But here's the really important thing that might kind of be, I'm sorry if it's a little too gross, but the poop piles up. If you don't at least get them out of the way to clean it up, the poop piles up. And let me tell you, if we don't listen to Jesus and get out of the pen, the poop piles up and we get covered in it. They eventually run out of food. If you don't move sheep around, they will eat all of the grass and they will have no food left. There are reasons why Jesus calls us out of the sheep pen. We have got to get up and move, even if it is only so that he can get in there and clean it up to be able to bring us back in. We have to take the time to get out of our comfort zone, out of our complacency, move out into the world, allow God to restore and renew things for us so that we're not just stuck in the poop. We have to recognize his voice, know it well enough to follow it. We have to get out of the sheep pen when he calls so that we can get cleaned up and find fresh food and fresh water. We have to follow him where he leads. And that means we have to actually trust him. Trust where he's leading us. I don't know if this is a good example, but you guys remember Indiana Jones? You remember Last Crusade, right? Last Crusade. Done all the stuff to follow the journal, the Crusade journal. Gets to the cave, and he has those 3 tests to pass in order that he can get to the Holy Grail. And the last test is that he's standing on the brink of a cliff. It looks like there's nothing there. The goal is like 10 yards away, just out of jumping range, and he's supposed to just take a step of faith. Now, I'm not telling you that to say that's what we're supposed to do. No, what I'm trying to tell you is that's what we've convinced ourselves following Jesus is. That the step of faith has to be something that's hidden and that it just takes us blindly jumping off into nothing in order to follow Jesus. Indiana Jones is not a good example of faith. Let me tell you that. What Jesus has done is he is calling us into good places. He is calling us to follow him into life. He said he came to bring life and life to the fullest, and yet we feel like he's trying to lead us off a cliff sometimes. But what he has called us to do is to follow him into good places. Again, trusting that he knows where good pastures are, because he's the shepherd and I'm only a sheep. We trust that he is leading us correctly. My favorite part of this, the thing that makes John chapter 10 one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, is that he says that his sheep follow him, but that he goes out, right? When he has brought out all of his sheep, in verse 4, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. The thing that is so amazing about this to me is that when he does call us out to follow him, to go somewhere, it's not that he's sending us into some scary place that he knows nothing about. He is only calling us to go places where he has already been. He is calling us to follow him in his footsteps. The thing about that is that it's not just that he is leading us into all the good places. Now, I know that sounds like a weird statement, but we can get into a point in life where we feel like God is only calling us into difficulty, that he's only calling us into trial and to trouble. And the thing is, in John chapter 15, just a little bit later on, John 15, starting in verse 18, he says, "The world hates you. Keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember what I told you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. God is leading us into life. He is leading us into good things, but at the same time, life comes with difficulties because the world hated Jesus first. Because he shone light onto the darkness, onto sin, and people didn't like it. And so the world hated him. And even though he is leading us into life, you have to remember that in those difficult times in life, in those problems, in the hard climbs, in the rocky terrain, in the scary parts, again, he is not asking you to go anywhere he hasn't walked first. He has put up with the jeering, and he has put up with the insults. He has put up with the hatred. He has dealt with those because they did it to him first, and he's asking you to follow him through those things in order to get to life. We have to recognize his voice and be able to hear it. We have to get out of the sheep pen when he calls us. We have to trust where he's leading us and know that where he is leading us, he has gone before. And I hope that you can begin to hear what's going on here. You can begin to hear how this might connect to Psalm 23. So if you've got it, flip to Psalm 23 again. It should be up on the screen. But David writes, "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the paths of the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." David understood this long before Jesus was here on earth. David understood what Jesus was talking about. And he explained it in the best way that he could. Think about that. He says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack for nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul." Sometimes I feel like we need to hear that part where he makes me lie down in green pastures. There are times I don't want to lie down. I feel like there is too much work to be done, or there are too many sporting events to go to. There's too much in life. You remember a few minutes ago I talked about how there are moments in my life where I wish I could find those boring parts, like that ride on the Jungle Cruise, where it's just calm, it's not throwing me around, it's not trying to make me sick, it's not beating me up. I wish I could find those spots. And David tells us there are times when God makes you go to those places because you need it. There might be boring spots in life, but because we have a guide, we have that person, that voice telling us the story and guiding us through this, that we know that even though it might seem boring, it's something we need. We need to take the time to relax and stop letting the world beat us up. We need good things from God. We need to allow him to give us rest and peace and calm and comfort. It might seem like it's the most boring ride in the theme park, but because he's the one at the front of the boat, it doesn't seem so boring anymore. It's a time of joy, a time of refreshing, because he is there leading us through. And he makes the difficult things a little bit easier. Like I said, there's that Guardians of the Galaxy Tower of Terror. That's what it will always be in my mind, just because that's what it was when I was a kid. But like I said, you've got this person telling you a story, and it doesn't make the bad things go away. He makes the hard times easier. I want you to notice that I'm not going to tell you he takes all the difficulties away. I'm not going to tell you that following Jesus means that it's never going to be a hard day again in your life. He makes it easier to get through those. You don't notice the jarringness as much. You don't notice the stomach issues. When he is with us telling us the story, then those ups and downs, those difficult things begin to make a little bit more sense. We might not always know the answers, but we know that somebody is telling us a story and they tell us that this is an important part of the story. And you might find that difficult. You might think, why would difficult things be an important part of the story? But you've got to remember, what does Jesus say in the Gospel of John, and what does David say in his psalm? Both of them point to one thing, that you are going to life, eternal life with God. And sometimes we need to prepare ourselves for that. We need to build up qualities for that. Paul writes in Romans chapter 5, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Paul is trying to get us to understand that there are eternal qualities that we need in order to live in God's kingdom forever. And that means sometimes that we've got to go through difficult things in order to develop those qualities, those skills. But the important part is that even though we go through those difficult things, that he is, again, walking with us and before us. We are not going anywhere he hasn't been before. He has experienced those things, and he is there with us, telling us the story of who God is and where we fit in his family, in order that those difficult things don't hurt us so much. He walks with us. Where are we going? That looks like the darkest valley, Jesus. Why would I go through there? Because the other side is important. He walks with us through those things. He is developing qualities in us that will benefit us to live in a kingdom with a king forever. And so we walk through these things together. And here's the most important thing. Let me finish with this. He is walking with you, telling you your story. He is walking with you, telling you your story, and he knows the ending. We get frustrated, we get confused because we don't see the ending. We don't know how it's going to turn out. We hope it's going to be a good ending. We hope that things are going to work out, but we don't always know. But because we are listening to his voice and going where he is leading, because we are trusting in him, taking a step of faith and following after his voice, knowing that he is going where we will find life, we know that he has the ending. And it makes it easier to follow. He's telling you your story. The story of a God who created you, who loves you, who desires the best for you, who knows that life is going to be difficult at times and maybe even boring at times. But whatever situation you might be in, he is living it with you and telling you how much he loves you and how much he desires for you to be with him and preparing you to go to the place where he is, because he has the ending written with you in mind. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much.